Hello and welcome back to the Motorsport Baithak podcast. I'm your host Didi and joining me once again today is my friend and your co-host Vedant. On this episode, we'll be reviewing the London E-Prix. So, let's grab some chai, take our seats, ready our opinions and dive right into the conversation. Hello Vedant, it's great to have you back here. It's been a week since I've talked to you. A really mixed London E-Prix for me, I'd say. What were your thoughts on the weekend?
Well, I was not able to watch all the sessions properly, but looking at the highlights and at the results, I guess it was a typical Formula E weekend. But I mean, it's a 120% Formula E weekend, as someone on the internet put it. So I agree with them.
Yeah, so obviously the first indoor-outdoor racetrack in a major motorsport event. So Formula E did make motorsport history this weekend. But what were your thoughts on the track? Because personally, it was definitely exciting to see an indoor-outdoor track. Although it didn't add like a lot in terms of racing, differently. But the turn 10 section seemed a little too tight for me, and as we saw throughout the weekend, especially in Sunday's race, round 13. A lot of crashes in that area, a lot of mistakes by drivers, a lot of bashing into the walls and into each other's cars. So I wouldn't say it improved racing. On Saturday's race, it seemed like people were really making the most of turn 10, especially Nick DeVries, who made multiple overtakes there. But in Sunday's race, we saw the championship leader Stoffel Vandoorne get taken out. We saw, I think, Buemi and someone else, clash, get at each other time and again.
Yeah, René Rast, I believe.
Yeah, René Rast and Buemi get into it. So, kind of disappointing there. But what were your thoughts on the track?
Well, definitely, as you said, the turn 10, 11 section, that double, hairpin thing was not required. I mean, I suppose that was made to, give them a place to regen the power. And I think bus stop chicane would have sufficed pretty well, and it would have made racing even better. But on the whole, heading into this weekend, we knew that racing was not going to be that exciting because the teams and the drivers themselves were lobbying for energy reduction because of the nature of the circuit, because it was going to be flat out all throughout the race.
But they did get that energy reduction, right? And then they had 8-minute long, attack mode. So they were running higher energy modes for longer than ever almost.
Yeah, but the energy reduction was not sufficient enough to impact the racing. And I think while the circuit itself was pretty spectacular and the racing was Formula E racing as such, I still think there can be a few more tweaks to the circuit heading into next season, and it's easy to do so because obviously it's a street circuit, and especially this circuit we can configure it any way we like, especially the indoor section. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think my favorite part about having like that indoor section was the drive that the winner made at the end of the race. When they were going towards the podium, and you had all that fireworks behind the car going off. And that little, tunnel that you go through, and then all those lights. I think that created a really good atmosphere, and it made it more exciting per se, or more glamorous in a way. And that is what I love the most. I'd say, but again, coming out of this weekend, we have a brand new championship leader going into the last round of Formula E. Who would have thought?
Not brand new. He's back in the championship lead.
Absolutely. But he hasn't been leading the championship for quite a while. He was a championship contender for the better half of the season, but lately he was not even in the top 5. But Nick DeVries, what a weekend for him! Coming away with 36 points, and he's got a 6-point lead. I think that's like the maximum championship lead, the maximum number of points someone's led the championship by, at least in the last few rounds. But talking about Nick DeVries and championship leaders in Formula E, if you look at the last couple of rounds, we had Edo Mortara coming into New York City with his championship lead, didn't score a single point that weekend, right? And then we had Sam Bird leading the championship coming into London, didn't score a point didn't score a single point this weekend, so it's not really boding well for Nick De Vries if this trend continues, and we might have a different championship winner instead of Nick De Vries at the end of round 15 in Berlin in a few weeks' time.
Well, as you said, that trend does not. I mean, Nick De Vries would not be happy to hear what you just said, and I think it's just it just shows you once again how competitive Formula E is, and how in the at the start of the season, their branding said it is the most competitive grid in motorsport ever, and we ourselves were pushing for the message that Formula E is as competitive as it can be, and it just shows you that anything can happen in Formula E heading into the last two rounds.
Absolutely, but you got to give it to Nick De Vries. Great race on Saturday. Had a calm head. He didn't start in the top 6. I think he was he was not in the Super Pole group, but made his way through the grid to finish second. And he drove a beautiful race. He was I think 6th, with 10-15 minutes to go, and he just sliced through the pack, but couldn't get past race winner Jake Dennis, who took a second Formula E victory, and what a commanding victory to take. Which just goes to show that Jake Dennis has what it takes to be in Formula E, especially if he's out in the front. We saw in Valencia when everybody was saying that Jake Dennis, shouldn't be leading the race. Yeah, the race leader will not win at the end of the race, but Jake Dennis drove a beautiful race from pole in Valencia to win. And similarly, forcing Alex Lynn into a mistake and then leading the race from there to take victory, his second victory in his rookie year, basically, for the BMW I and Andretti team. So that was great. But coming back to Nick De Vries, boding well for the Mercedes EQ team. And what can we expect from him going? Because it's been a roller coaster, right? He started off really well. Now he needs to finish on a high. He's got a 6-point lead, which is absolutely nothing in terms of Formula E. But considering the way he has raced over this past weekend, and if he can take that form into Berlin, he is my favorite for the championship win.
Well, everyone would be, and especially Nick De Vries and the championship leaders would be looking at the weather forecast for Berlin right now, because if it rains, this Group 1 will not get into Super Pole. And as in the first race in London, it was evident because everyone in Super Pole was from Groups 3 and 4, and the championship leaders from Group 1 were in the bottom 5.
Absolutely.
So it's not going to be easy, and it's never is easy in Formula E. But consistency, and if he can get into points and get a good qualifying lap, especially, I think, and he has been good in qualifying so far. So I wouldn't say he's my favorite, because I clearly don't have any favorites right now, because I don't want to put any money on anyone in Formula E, because it can go horribly wrong, right? So yeah, but I think he's in the driver's seat, and I think it's his championship to lose right now so far.
Absolutely. I mean, Nick De Vries, I think, was in Group 1 going into round 13, so he did well to qualify for Super Pole for the Sunday's race, and then I think he started 3rd or 4th on the grid, while his teammate Stoffel Vandoorne took pole for round 13. Now, talking about Stoffel Vandoorne, he had a great start to the season. We're coming towards the end, and he started to come back. His performance has started to get better. But again, I feel like Stoffel Vandoorne has had horrible luck throughout the entire season. There's been multiple instances when he's been taken out by someone else, and today once again, in round 13, we saw Stoffel Vandoorne being taken out by Oliver Rowland while he was defending from Nick De Vries into turn 10 and just putting Stoffel out of the race. Stoffel Vandoorne could have come away with 25 points at the end of the race, and Mercedes-Benz EQ team could have been leading the championship by about 15 to 20 points. That's a commanding lead in the Constructors' Championship going into the final 2 rounds, but it was just not meant to be.
Definitely. I mean, Stoffel Vandoorne has been phenomenal all season. He was phenomenal last season, and after the first few rounds, we were looking at Mercedes at the leading team, and we were almost worried that for Mercedes will be dominating Formula E as well as Formula 1. But I think, while they had a miserable middle part of the season, and obviously they weren't enjoying it. But I think towards the end, getting back into rhythm and getting back into points and leading the race. But it just shows you that the Mercedes team really has the power, has the pace in the car, and I think Stoffel can hope for next season to be better.
Yeah,
Better stuff.
absolutely. And Toto Wolff was there to support the the Mercedes EQ Formula One team. Um, so yeah, it was great to see Toto there, supporting his other team per se. But let's talk about Alex Lynn. I think he scored the most points this weekend, coming away with 44 points. I think he was not even in the top 10 going into this weekend. Now he sits sixth in the Drivers' Championship with 78 points, 17 points behind Nick De Vries. But 44 points of those 78 points came from this weekend alone. And if this man, continues on this form into Berlin, there's no stopping him. Took his second ever career pole in round 12. His first career pole came in New York City in 2017 on his debut race, I think. And took his first ever Formula E win in London. And you should have seen Dilbagh Singh celebrating that win. I think Dilbagh Singh hugged someone and picked him up, and then both of them fell on the ground. So
Yeah.
that was really good to see. Dilbagh Singh was ecstatic after that win, and Alexson was really emotional in that car. Having raced in Formula E for 4 years and only getting his first win now. So great stuff from him, and I'm just happy that Mahindra Racing came away with so many points and did so well this weekend, and I hope they can continue this form into the Berlin weekend and maybe make up a few places in the Constructors' Championship. Right now they're about 26 points behind fourth place DS Techeetah. So if they make up say 20-25 points, they might be fifth in the championship, which will be much better than finishing seventh where they're sitting right now.
Yeah, I mean, see, Alex Lynn, we knew Alex Lynn was the talent, and he had been consistent and he had been performing better than his teammate Alex Sims, and he just showed it. 2 races, third in the first race and a win in the second race. So I think that just shows you how his talent is. And Mahindra have not confirmed their driver lineup for next season, but we know that Oliver Rowland will be taking over one seat. Now, that second seat, I think Alex Lynn is the prime candidate now, because Alexander Sims has not been at the top of his game so far. He had a miserable 2 home races in London, and I think the form Alex Lynn is showing and the potential he has shown puts him in the prime spot to take that seat.
Absolutely. And talking about a miserable home race, talk about Jaguar Racing coming away with just 15 points with that third place podium finish for Mitch Evans in round 13. They must be really disappointed because they were championship contenders. Sam Bird was leading the championship before this weekend. He obviously didn't score any points in both the races, but Jaguar Racing was, I think, a couple points behind Envision Virgin Racing, and now they're sitting in third, 9 points behind Envision Virgin, and with Mercedes EQ team, just 2 points ahead, but still, it kind of a blow for them, even though I guess they had a bit of a cushion to other teams before going into this weekend. So they've got to get their act together. They were probably the most consistent team, even more consistent than the Mercedes team throughout the season. But this weekend has just not gone their way at all.
Yeah, definitely. And I don't think anyone would be more disappointed from these 2 races than Sam Bird, because he had a difficult start to the season. I mean, obviously he won one of the opening 2 races, but had a difficult season after that, and finally he was in the championship lead, but scoring 0 points at his home event is, I mean, it must be very heartbreaking. And he's 14 points behind the championship leader now. So
Absolutely.
two races in Berlin are absolutely crucial for that championship.
Exactly. Now let's talk. Let's come to the most controversial point of the weekend from today: the Lucas Degrassi penalty and everything around that. Now, obviously, we'll talk about the Formula E regulations and how they're not in place, and FIA is to blame somewhat for this mistake. But big brain move from Audi, the Audi, the Audi team, the Audi Sport ABD Scheffler Formula E team. Big brain move. I've got to give it to them. I've got to give it to the team principal, the race strategist. For those who don't know, Lucas Degrassi was 9th or 10th during the second safety car, and then he was told to come into the pit, stop, and then leave, and that basically gave him the race lead when he came out of the pits. He came out in front of I think at that time Stoffel Vandoorne, because he was still in the race, and basically took the lead from him without having to overtake 10 cars on track. Just went through the pit. So big brain move. Not a big fan of it myself, even though I appreciate Audi's effort. Definitely not something that I want to see happen again. And it just goes to show, that even FIA haven't gotten all the rules down, because this is the second time it has happened. I think it had happened in a race in Hong Kong before. I don't recall which race or which year, but I think I heard Dario Franchitti in the commentary box reminding us of that one incident. But again, I don't want to see it happen again. I don't want anyone to be able to, obviously take advantage of that loophole in the rule. So it'll be interesting to see what Formula E and FIA do within the rules and regulations to curb this from happening again. But obviously the controversy was around the penalties, right? So technically, according to the Audi team, Alex Lynn did come into the pits, and the regulations said that you have to stop. If you don't stop, you get a penalty. So according to the team, Alex Lynn stopped. Sorry, not Alex Lynn. Degrassi stopped and then left the pits. To which the FIA said, "Oh no, he didn't come to a stop. He might have locked up his wheels, but that didn't mean that the car came to a halt." Now, obviously, in Formula E, the teams don't have live data from the car, so they have to download the data after the race. So most likely, the Audi team will be going through the data after the race, and then probably will go and protest if they find anything worth, anything that does not concur with what the FIA have said. But Degrassi was given a drive-through penalty, which the team didn't inform him about, and then Degrassi was basically black flagged on the penultimate lap, which means he was disqualified. However, after the race, in the initial classification, that penalty was converted into a 20-second time penalty, which means Degrassi essentially finished 8th and came home with, I think, 3 points.
4 points. Yep.
4 points, yeah.
But I was looking at, the FIA documents from the Formula E weekend, and it clearly states that Lucas Degrassi was disqualified. Article number, I think it was 33, and Article 34 states that the Audi team were fined some 30,000 euros because they failed to inform Lucas Degrassi about that initial penalty, and any further breach would lead to suspension from
Audi's
the championship.
Disqualification, yep.
Yeah. So, but I'll come to that controversy later, but here's the right point. If Degrassi is disqualified, Joel Eriksson will get his first points of Formula E. And for him to come, out of nowhere in Formula E and race only 3-4 races, so it's a good achievement. But yeah, coming back to the penalty, I think loopholes we live from loopholes in motorsports, right? In Formula 1, we have seen Red Bull and Mercedes exploit loopholes, and Ferrari and everyone in the past, and everywhere we live for loopholes in motorsports. But this thing was not. It was very unsportsmanlike of Audi, I would say. Even though it was, as you said, a big brain move, it was not. It couldn't be encouraged.
It was not in the spirit of racing at all.
Exactly.
It was not in the spirit of sportsmanship, and which is why I said, if it was a big brain move, and I'll give it to Audi, and even if Degrassi ended up winning the race because of the loophole in the regulation, which is fine with me, but I would like to see FIA and Formula E take immediate action to curb this from happening again, because this just spoils the racing. Because next time this happens, next time there's a safety car, and the teams know, okay, it's faster to go through the pits. We'll see the entire field just go through the pits, make a stop, and then it'll be chaos.
And as you said, that there was an incident in Hong Kong a few years ago, and I don't know if it's true or not because I wasn't following Formula E but that time. But if it is true, and FIA and Formula E have done nothing about it till now, it just shows you that FIA and Formula E. I mean, and we have talked about this so much. The regulations in Formula E are not up to the mark, and it creates a lot of confusion. The fans are not happy. The teams are not happy. It's just not what you want from a World Championship motor event. World Championship Series.
Absolutely. And it just, I mean, I don't know what's happening, but definitely, Formula E and FIA need to work together much more often than they already are. But really confusing, if Degrassi was qualified by the FIA, then why, classify him 8th? Just go one way, right? Don't try to, appease the Audi team. If you think that was unsportsmanlike, then go ahead and penalize them. And I think I had a similar take on the Racing Point incident, the Racing Point Pink Mercedes controversy back in the day. I was like, if you think it's unsportsmanlike, then put in a clause in the rules and regulations that, because, okay, now people talk about rules and regulations being grey areas and, not specific enough. Then if we have already accepted that, then put in a clause that says unsportsmanlike conduct will be, penalized. And if the Racing Point team, in my opinion, was at least penalized because of unsportsmanlike conduct in their Racing Point controversy, and I think similarly Audi has been fined because of that. The £30,000 or euro fine that Audi has been given is more because of that unsportsmanlike conduct than just simply for not following the rules and regulations or finding a loophole, in my opinion at least. And I think it's not wrong for the FIA to put in a clause like that into the rules and regulations and be like, all right, this is a grey area, but that just will push the teams to make sure that whatever they are doing, if it's a technical loophole, if it's a sports, a regulation loophole in the sporting regulations, whatever they do is not against the very essence of the sport, in my opinion. But yeah.
Yeah, I think these are grey areas, but it's just the magnitude of how you utilize that and how much grey area is there that, that affects the series and everything. So, again, it's very controversial, and we will be talking about this, and Degrassi will definitely come out and defend himself, and the Formula E team will come out and put the blame on Lucas Degrassi and Audi. But I think it was a very unfortunate event, and it just left a mark on Formula E, like a lot of other instances have done in the past.
Yeah, but this, that's not take away from the fact that we've had some great Formula E races this season, especially when Formula E was visiting Monaco. So there have been a lot of positives from this season, and even this season has been very, very engaging. And we still don't have a championship winner, so couldn't have asked for more. Going into the final 2 rounds of the championship, which will be on August 14th and 15th, 3 weeks from now. Quite a bit of a break, in my opinion. I would have really liked that the last 2 rounds to be within a couple of weeks, if not next week. But that's just me.
We'll have something in the Formula 1 summer break, so that's fine.
That is true. That is absolutely true. We'll have something to talk about during the Formula 1 summer break. But that's really all from my side. What about you? Oh, just one last thing. I know you missed out on the races this weekend, but one thing that really disappointed me and I wanted to bring up was the quality of racing. There were times during the London E-Prix when the quality of racing was just amazing, but there were times during this particular weekend when I was really put off from watching the Formula E races with how unprofessional almost, the racing was at times, especially, like we mentioned before, Buemi and Rennes and similar incidents where drivers were kind of just going at each other almost, out of frustration and things like that. And I think there needs to be something put in place. Obviously, the drivers did get penalized whenever something like that happened. I think Antonio Felix da Costa got put into the wall by Andrea Lauterer too during round 13, and that happened too. So obviously, that's, as a spectator, it just takes away from the experience of racing that I'm looking out for. and it's very off-putting when you see professional racers engage in this sort of behavior on track. And I think I would definitely encourage, the Formula E teams and even like the drivers to be a little more professional on track. Obviously, you don't want to give up places, but we want hard racing, but we don't want to see people putting each other into the wall or crashing into each other out of frustration and anger.
Yeah. I mean, talking about, unprofessional racing, and not unprofessional, but the quality of racing, as you said, was quite low. And I think I have seen this in Formula E quite often. Since, these cars are not very expensive and the bodywork is, basically
It's
plastic.
relatively cheaper to Formula 1, let's say.
Yeah, and
It's still expensive, but not as expensive as motorsport usually is.
my mistake. But what I'm trying to say is Formula E drivers tend to take, things to the next level. And they don't... I mean, they fight more than, even stock car drivers fight.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
I think that's not what expected from an open wheel series, at least, and especially a world
Exactly.
championship. So
Absolutely, I agree with you there. But that's all from my side. Any closing thoughts from you, Vedant, before we wrap up this podcast?
well, I have something food for thought for you and our listeners. So since we have the Tokyo Olympics going on right now, I was just thinking that motorsports should be in the Olympics, because every year we see new sports being introduced. We have surfing and sport climbing introduced this year. So I was thinking about a race of champions style event in Olympics, and I mean it would be easy to organize in a way, because we already have race of champions. We can get the same organizers and similar logistics. And as we saw in London, we can create a circuit almost anywhere in the world right now,
Absolutely.
because I mean that was a convention center that was turned into a circuit. So
Exactly.
we can create a circuit almost anywhere. And qualifying for the the teams qualifying and everything like that can be easily formulated by FIA and the IndyCar regulators in USA.
It's definitely possible. Yep.
So I mean, I was just thinking out loud, and I see it as a good prospect for the Olympics and for motorsports.
I mean, definitely. It'll get more people to watch the Olympics too, I guess. But definitely, it's definitely food for thought. Definitely something interesting, and I guess it'll be something similar to what we used to have, like the A1GP. I think that was like the nations used to compete.
Yeah.
Something similar to that. Something similar to the ROC. Hey man, I'm of the opinion that more racing is just better in general. So if we can take racing to the Olympics and have another month of racing with people representing the countries, I'm all for it. Definitely.
Think about the team ups. Sebastian Vettel and Mick Schumacher. If you only take from Formula 1.
Formula 1.
Lewis Hamilton and Lando Norris or George Russell, and
Absolutely.
even if you go down to IndyCar, we have a lot of talent in the Americas, and I think it's
Joseph
very
Newgarden and everybody in the same machinery basically. So
Exactly.
that's just much more exciting.
it would be very, very. I mean, I can't not think about it right now.
Yeah, it's the stuff of the dreams, I must say. But we're gonna wrap up this podcast. So thank you, Vedant, for joining me once again. It's been lovely talking to you, and I am really excited to see how this championship goes. I have no clue who's gonna win, but that's the fun of it. Thank you once again. Thank you to our listeners for making it this far, and stay tuned for more motorsport content coming your way. Thank you so much. We'll catch you on the next one.